Hi everyone, thank you for watching. My name's Henry and I'm going to talk to you about multimeters today. I have students coming to me asking me what multimeter must I buy. Now my answer to that is buy a cheapie, because I've had expensive meters which I lost or was stolen. Cheap multimeters, if you lose it you don't care. If they steal, they don't want to steal it because it's a cheap one. It's not worth a lot of money. So when you look at cheap digital multimeters, now this one, I hope that camera can see, this one is my favorite. I use this one most of the time. Now this one's labeled Major Tech, but it's actually a OEM, because this is the one that Lantis has got, and it's exactly the same thing at more or less the same price. Most important part of a multimeter, a lot of people say accuracy. Accuracy is not that important unless you really specifically need, but for audio repairs, TV repairs, basic circuit design, working with microcontrollers, building power supplies, this is more than sufficient. If you start to design measuring equipment, in other words, you design a multimeter like this, then you need an accurate meter, because you need to calibrate your design. So only in that case I would say get an expensive meter. But this is my first one. It's my very first digital multimeter. Works 100%. Display is a little bit small, but not too bad. Getalong. You have on this, you have the ohms, which you must have on a multimeter. Then you've got your voltages and AC, DC and AC. And then this particular one has got a battery tester and can test a couple of milliamps. In 30 years I've tested amps maybe twice. Now what you need in a multimeter is voltage, AC and DC, and ohms. And then very important, continuity. Now you get two types of multimeters. This one is not I haven't got one auto scale. I don't like auto scale multimeters. You know, it's got its pros and it's got its cons, but I've seen they jump around, especially if your voltage is not consistent and it jumps around, then your meter starts to jump around and you can't see what the actual voltage is, although you can lock it. I prefer the meter where the one that's manual. I simply start at the highest voltage and I work my way down until I get the voltage I want to measure. Now, reason why I'm not using this one anymore is when you take it to the diode continuity test section and you touch your probes, there's no audible. It gives you a display, but there's no audible sound, and that is a big problem if you work on these things every day. Because when you test, for instance, in an amplifier, you would go through components and wait for that sound. Certain components you expect to be short circuit and other components you expect to be open. For instance, if you test a capacitor and it's short, it's faulty. If you test a transistor or diode and you hear that, you know that one's faulty. With a non-audible multimeter, every time you test, you've got to look back to see what the reading is. So you've got to read that display every time you test. And believe me, that is a pain in the you know where. So if I do not spend a lot of money on multimeters, buy cheap. Make sure it's got an audible continuity tester. Must be able to do ohms, must be able to do voltage, AC and DC. And then, you know, usually on this side, on the right hand side of the meter, here they have got some of the less important things that you don't you don't use it that often. So that is my suggestion. Don't spend a lot on a multimeter. Do spend good money on an oscilloscope, because there you need to spend, there you got to buy quality. Cheap oscilloscopes don't work. This is a cap tester, and in my opinion, really unnecessary piece of equipment. Capacitors are really cheap, so we've got a saying, and we say, if you doubt a cap, replace the cap. So cap tester, don't spend money on it. It's not necessary. It's a waste of money. This is another multimeter of mine. What we got here is DC. Oh, this one's nice. This is nice. It's got frequency measuring as well. That's handy. If you can get a cheap multimeter that can measure frequency, that's a bonus. These transistor testers is nonsense. I've never used that. You don't need that. Continuity, this one, let's just get a set of probes stuck into it. Let's see what this one says. Get the probes into it. Now this one, that's the diode testing there. I don't know if this camera will be able to see here. That is the diode setting, and over here at the bottom is the continuity setting. So between these two multimeters, I'll take this one. Of course, that setting is in one place. So we take this one out of the way, put it aside, and we get this plugged in again. Let's carry on. Right. Let's see what we've got here. Here's another relatively cheap. I'll put these links in the description, so if you guys want to get hold of these things. So we've got ohms, we've got volts, we've got AC, and this one can test it's got a few capacitors that it can test over here at the bottom. Can test a couple of capacitors, 20 amps, AC amps, that's nice. But there, it's got an audible. So this, as a buyer for my company, I always try and buy stuff that I would use myself, and that is important, So in other words, I will look at the product and I'll decide, would I be able to use this? And then I order the stuff on those grounds. So this is a meter that I would suggest. Not too bad to buy. I'll put the links in the description at the bottom, so if you want to get yourself a multimeter. This is the other one. Now this is the same thing as the one that I use for my day-to-day meter. Exactly the same thing. This is just a yellow one, that's an orange one. My personal opinion, this is the one to go for. Cheap enough that nobody would steal it. It's got the continuity testing, diode testing, AC/DC, and I think this is a nice feature. It's backlit, so you can actually switch. Use it at night. Now, you know what? I haven't had that problem, because usually if it's too dark to see the components, if it's too dark to see the display, it's too dark to see the components. So backlit multimeter, don't know what. I guess it's better than having nothing. I guess if you got one with a light in, if you need it, you can use it. Okay, this is the one I would suggest, and this is the other one, multimeter. If you want to buy a multimeter, don't see necessity of spending a lot of money on it. I don't think it's worth it. Spend more money on a soldering iron and on oscilloscope. That's the thing to buy.